everyone, and I'm very pleased this week to introduce Dr. Gemma Newman. Now, you may have caught up with Gemma recently on a podcast with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and I think I mention his name every week, one way or the other. I think I'm I'm not a closet fan. I am a fan, and it was a great listening to you on it, and very much around your personal journey, and and I know that we're going to touch on that today. So actually, while I just put my glasses on, when I'm reading, because I have to put my glasses on. Very sad. So what we're going to do today is talk about our immune system, how important it is, crucially for us, why we all need to understand it and be engaged with it, and how we can. I think all of these things about how to give the best advantage to our bodies, isn't it? Really, to fight all the things we have to fight on a daily basis. Health-wise, emotionally-wise, mentally health, etc. So what would be interesting, Gemma, is if we could start off with your own personal story, which is, I suppose, the foundation and the basis as to why we're talking today.
Yeah, it is. And thank you so much, Katrina, for inviting the lovely people at Talk Health. I'm really excited to be here with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. Rangan Chatterjee is a real trailblazer. He is a wonderful force for community, and so it was a lovely honour to chat with him and receive some lovely feedback for that. So thank you for mentioning that as well. And I think perhaps one of the things that we have in common is that Dr. Chatterjee and myself, we both really value the concept of helping people to help themselves. He's done an awful lot of research over and above his medical training in order to help people make that happen, and his books. And, I've done the same. I think we both feel really passionately that much as we love the fact that we're doctors and we've had all this medical training, it's a toolbox that's only really half full. And I was acutely aware of that when I started out in my medical career. I was young and naive, and I thought that I was going to be saving lives every day. And I quickly began to realise that what people needed day to day was quite different in some ways from the training that I had received, and that people didn't fit into these neat boxes. It was really about trying to understand where they were coming from, what challenges they faced, how they lived, where they lived, how they grew up, and all these other things that you don't really necessarily immediately consider, especially as you come fresh out of training. And I heard Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he said this comment that really struck me to the core. He said, sooner or later, we're going to have the river, and instead we're going to have to walk upstream and figure out why it is that they keep falling in. Oh. And that really struck me very deeply, because it's something that I feel like with my medical training, I didn't always have that root cause connection. And it was a general ethos of, the body goes wrong, and we're here to try and fix that. And the body is inherently flawed because all these things can happen, and it's very hard to explain why, but they just do. And so I found myself questioning that and really trying to sort of dig down deeper into mechanisms of health and disease. And it led me down all sorts of paths, because as a young medic, I wasn't really looking after myself that much, actually. I was very busy with my ward work. I would do night shifts, I would do long sort of sessions into the night, and I'd get home and I'd barely be able to stay awake to eat my dinner. And I knew that I could do better for myself. I was there just grabbing what I could because I was busy. I'd go onto the ward, I'd grab chocolates and Rose's chocolates on the wards, and then I'd go to the doctor's mess and I'd eat Domino's pizzas, and I just grabbed whatever was available. And I began to realise that it was taking its toll, and I had a real lack of energy. I was feeling sluggish, and so that's when I began to think, well, I need to look after myself a bit better. If I'm going to be telling people in the future that things that they can do, I need to be able to I began to start then thinking about how lifestyle was important for health. And back then I didn't have the same amount of research behind me in terms of nutrition and lifestyle, and so I just kind of looked at what people did in the magazines, that carbs are bad, cut your carbs, calorie counting, move your body, calories in versus calories out. These are the kind of messages that we get. And I mean, fortunately, I didn't have a big emphasis on body image, and that was not something that was ever hugely important to me. So I'm quite thankful for that. But I know that many women are, because that's what we're fed every day. We're fed that you have to look a certain way, otherwise you can't be confident. You can't go and show your body because of all these picture perfect people. So that's a whole other issue I think that's really important to think about. But for me, in my personal health, it was about getting more energy, feeling good in my body. And I did have some success. I did this low carb approach. I ate chicken and fish and salads, and I started running and doing workouts at the I didn't have a gym membership, but I would do them in my lounge. And I began to realize that yes, I was getting results. I felt good, I was confident, had loads of energy, but then my blood profile told me a different story. And I had a raised lipid profile, and I was getting knee pains when I was running. And I felt really despondent because I was in the prime of life. I was in my 20s, I had everything going for me, and yet I knew that also in the back of my mind there's a strong family history of heart disease. My grandfather died suddenly of a heart attack in his early 60s, and I didn't know it then, but in the future, my father as well was going to suffer the same fate. He died suddenly of a heart attack in his late 50s. And I realised that perhaps that was my genetic destiny too. I've got a family history of cancer. And I thought about this, but my family and my patients, 1 in 2 of us will have a cancer diagnosis at some point. The vast majority of us will die of either heart disease or cancer, often before our time. And this was something that I felt really passionate about. So I decided that perhaps at that time it was just my genetic fate and I'd have to deal with it when the time came. But then fast forward a few years, and my husband, who's not medical, he ran the London Marathon and he wanted to do well. He was aiming for a good time and he was really into it, and he was doing all this training, but he kept on getting inflamed, he kept on getting injured. And so I was beginning to see for him, well, in his journey, what he was doing. And he decided to look at ultra athletes. He was thinking to himself, well, if they can run 3 times a marathon distance, maybe I can do what they're doing. And he realized after reading his books that a lot of them were fully plant-based in their approach to eating. And he said he was going to give it a go. And I thought, oh God, no, don't do that. You'll get a nutritional deficiency. We'll never go to our friends' houses again. So it felt so stigmatizing to me. And, just instinctively, I felt that they couldn't be right just doing that. But I watched carefully, and he did it, and he did really, really well. He was able to improve his marathon running time by 1 hour and 10 minutes, which was almost unheard of. I could not believe the improvements that he'd made. And I started to do some research at that point because I realized that this is probably something I should know about. And of course, I'm not an athlete. Many of my patients aren't athletes. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, how can I help my patients? Maybe this could be applicable to heart disease. Maybe this could be applicable to cancer, immune diseases. Maybe this could be applicable to hormonal problems. And that's when I dug deep into the literature, and I realized that there were, in fact, applications for all sorts of things, and that there are a number of ways in which plant-based nutrition can be helpful. And of course, I have a passion for other things as well. I know how important it is to get the right amount of sleep and to control stress and to move our bodies. And it all began to click into place. And that was when my passion really began, because I could see the magic happening with my patients when they were excited about making changes to their health. I could see people, really improving beyond what you could possibly have ever hoped for, and that really drove my passion. And that's where the story continues.
Gosh, okay. So as you said, it's what you've learned over the years, and I suppose in seeing things has made you more passionate in the work that you're actually doing. So is it a good idea now to talk about our immune system and the role it plays in our health?
Yes, and I think it's really important. That's what the topic is today. And of course, the immune system is very complex, and it's hard for people to understand because there's lots of different systems involved, but it does play a really central part in overall well-being. And it's not just about avoiding coughs and colds. It's about so much more than that. 70% of immune cells reside right next to the gut wall. And so the connection that we have between gut health and immune health is really very strong. And, when we eat food, what we're doing is we're providing nutrients for our body, yes, but we're also providing nutrients for and our microbes create certain substances that then communicate directly with our immune system and help to modulate our immune system and to help it function properly. So that's why there is a huge link between nutrition and our immune health and our gut health and our brain health, because our endocrine system, our hormone system, and our neurotransmitters, which is the substances that help our brains to function, and of course our microbes, they're all in very intimate communication with each other. And so if you're starting out giving yourself the right fuel, the right build.
Oh, I think
And so, with regard to immunity, it's about food. There's lots of ways in which our immune health can affect us day to day. So yes, we know that our immune cells help protect us against infection, but our immune in whether we get certain cancers or not. They're also involved in whether we get diseases or not. They're also certain allergies or not. And so you can start to build up a picture that there are all sorts of different diseases that we are suffering from that can be mediated by our immune system and can be improved by a healthy immune system. So things as diverse as lupus, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, eczema, certain types of cancer, and of course the ability to repel infections that are in the environment around us all the time. Allergy things are actually rooted in a functioning immune system. And so, when you start to realize the bigger picture, you begin to see how you can then feel empowered to make a difference to how your immune system functions. Does that make sense?
Yes, well, and funny enough, I was looking at the things that we had discussed, and also, I haven't plugged your book yet, and you can, by the way, enter for a copy of Gemma's. It is the most lovely book, and it's full. I think it helps people at all different levels of where you are. You can dip in and out of it at any point. There's recipes in it, but there's educational about supplements. I just thought it was really interesting. But yes, sort of reading through this and the stuff I just can't believe how much, looking at this thing, that it touches across all different conditions, which is obviously very relevant to us, from MS through to psoriasis and a full range of everything.
Yes, you're right. It really does. That's what I wanted to convey in the book. I really wanted it to be a one who are interested in particular disorders and how their food choices can help them with those disorders, and not only some of the science which they may never have known about, but hopefully in a really accessible way, and with the practical application as well, with the colour photographs of the recipes and the beautiful colour illustrations on each page, the colour coded chapters. That was my hope, that people could just flick through and then the information could sort of pop out from the page and help them. So thank you for sharing that. But you're right, it really does. Our skin health, our gut health, our mental health, and of course our immune health. And sometimes I think when getting back to autoimmune diseases, I think sometimes that and cancer are some of the most empowering diagnoses that patients can get. That when somebody says to you that you have an autoimmune disease diagnosis or you have a cancer, I think that the way it's worded and the way that we still don't really understand a lot of the mechanisms behind why they happen. And so, well, in some cases certainly, and so a lot of medics will talk about this in terms of your body is attacking itself, and your body is growing a tumor and your body is attacking your own cells, in the case of cancer and autoimmune disease respectively. And it can feel really disempowering because you start to think, well, how can I trust my body? And why is my body doing this to me? And I really don't like that messaging, because I think that one of the most empowering things that we can do is to give our bodies absolute and unconditional love and gratitude for what our bodies do for us every day, and feel that in our souls and our hearts, as well as just something on a logical level. Because our bodies are incredible, and there are things that we can do to help our bodies through this journey of life that will improve things, even if we don't fully understand some of the mechanisms whereby these diseases occur. We are beginning to see that there are a lot of environmental links. Now, we could potentially talk a bit about the role of things like microplastics in, hormonal imbalances and autoimmune diseases, but also, our nutrition. It does play a really big role, and that's something that we're not really taught too much about. And that's something that I really hope that this message can change, and obviously the book change as well. That's my aim, that people will certainly start to feel, hang on a minute, there is something I can do, and there are things that I can achieve, and I can feel better about myself because I'm doing these things for me, for my body. Regardless of the outcome, I can just feel good.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's taking control, which I think is hugely important, isn't it? At the time of some form of diagnosis, is that actually you feel that you're not, you are empowered to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the time with these things, everybody else has an opinion. Your doctors have an opinion, your family members will have an opinion, and some people find this just so overwhelming. And so on the one hand, you don't want to, feel bombarded by other people. Oh, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. But at the same time, you want to be able to take a step back and think, I want to take ownership of this situation, and I want to do what I need to do to feel better. And yes, I want to take advice from my doctor. Yes, I want to take advice from people who love me. That's clearly important. But it's about understanding that those boundaries that you create for yourself are very important to help you decide where you want to move forward and how you want to make a change for yourself. And then that's where you can start to feel empowered.
Yeah, and I'm a great believer in trying to listen to your body, which I think we've lost the power of listening to our body, because I think our body is amazing that it does actually know. If you listen, your body is telling you what it needs. And also, but it's a slow process as well. Our bodies take time. There's no cure. Well, we don't like the word cure, but there aren't these great quick fixes that we look for everywhere in our life.
Well, it's human nature. Of course, we would all love a quick fix, wouldn't we? But I think also sometimes, again, taking a step back is useful, because sometimes what our bodies crave is, Dunkin' Donuts 24/7 if we're feeling particularly low. And I think it's also about being kind to yourself, but also understanding that sometimes your cravings don't necessarily match what your body is telling you that it needs, because sometimes your microbes are actually in control of those cravings somewhat. So that's another sort of interesting element to the mix, is to say, our microbes grow based on what we feed them. And when we have a diet, generally speaking, that's full of things like whole grains and beans and lentils and spices and nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables, we grow quite different microbes to when we have more in the way of processed foods and oily foods and animal products and other sorts of foods that grow very different kinds of microbes. And so I think you're right, it's about the sugar, those cravings. And so, and interestingly, there's more efferent fibers, there's more nerve fibers going from the gut to the brain than the other way around. And so it's quite probable that sometimes our guts take over our logical mind and tell us that we really need a certain type of food to make us feel better, for that immediate dopamine hit. And it's not even our fault. The food companies often spend millions, if not billions in some cases, on research tried and hijack our taste buds to override our natural instincts for what we should be consuming. And how can we possibly fight against that? Because it's we're almost set up to fail in that scenario. But there is hope. I think if awareness brings hope, doesn't it? And
yes, absolutely. So where do we start then when we're looking at
Well, where we start depends on who you are and what's important to you. But I can go through some of the things that really do help. And when I do that, hopefully some of your listeners and the people watching right now or watching the recording later will be taking some notes and writing down some things that really resonate with them. And those are the things that they can start with. And it really depends on you. So, you may be focusing mostly on nutrition, which most people do, especially to start on this kind of journey. Or you may be focusing more on stress management. You may be focusing more on your sleep patterns. So I'll go through a few things that will be really beneficial, and then you can decide what so I mean, I'll start off by talking a bit about more whole foods, more plant foods. What does that mean? I like to talk about whole foods, plant-based diets or lifestyles. It's not a diet. It's not something that, you do sort of like a crash course in eating loads of fruits and veg. It's about gradually increasing the amount of these delicious and vibrant. So try not to think about it in terms of going on a diet. It's rather, how much more of this good stuff can I include in my life? Where am I right now, and where can I get to? And so a whole foods plant-based approach really does emphasize a variety of colors of fruits and vegetables that should make up what you're eating day to day. And I think the diversity of the plant foods that we eat is a direct correlation with our gut health. So the more diversity of color and variety that we can get, the better. So that's the number one. Things like legumes are really helpful. So chickpeas, lentils, beans, haricot beans, white beans, black beans, baked beans. There's so many different kinds of beans that are actually tremendously useful, because what they do is they can modulate your insulin levels, and they can also communicate directly with those gut bugs. They can produce something special, a special substance called short chain fatty acids. And is they can directly communicate with your immune cells to help them to function effectively, and they can also communicate with your hormones to let you know that everything's all right, to regulate your insulin, to regulate your cortisol, to regulate your serotonin, and these are the kinds of things that you really want to be enjoying much more of. Whole grains are important. There's loads of longitudinal studies to suggest that whole grains are great for your health and well-being. So thinking about, if you have celiac disease, think about gluten-free grains as much as you can, but try not to exclude whole grains if you're able to. And herbs and spices, these are really important for our immune cells. I know that garlic is technically not a herb or a spice, it's a root, but garlic is brilliant. The allicin in it is great for our immune function, and the variety of different herbs. It doesn't have to be spicy hot. There's an amazing array of spices that you can include in your foods, really to improve your immune function. And having this more whole foods approach is very helpful because it lowers inflammation in the body, which is really important for all sorts of conditions, including mental health. It reduces your CRP, which is one of the blood tests that your doctor often does to look for inflammation in the body, and relevant for things like inflammatory arthritis as well. It can potentially reduce your body mass index. I know the body mass index is a very rough tool for well-being, but it's possible when you're having all these fibre and water-rich foods, then naturally you're just going to hopefully fill up that tummy and not feel as though you're going to get so many of the cravings because your tummy's full of these fibre-rich foods. And it's great for the gut healing, like I say. So that's the number one. It's amazing how easy it is to switch it. So if you like curry, try a curry, a mince chili, you could try a plain chili. If you like spaghetti bolognese, you could do a lentil bolognese. There's loads of different kinds of cuisines that fit in really nicely with these more plant-based options. And it's about having a little journey of discovery. Try not to make too much stress or pressure over it. The great thing about it is that you can just go slowly. You can look up inspiring recipes and give them a go, see how you feel. And a lot of the time, if you find something that you really like, what's great is that you can have that as part of your regular routine. So after a few weeks, you've got your stock meals sorted and you're good to go. So that's one of the things you can do. In terms of other things that you can do to help your immune function, believe it or not, nasal breathing has a role to play. So our nostrils. Yes, but it's true. Our nostrils contain hair, which is a natural barrier to airborne pollution and particles in general. And what's interesting is as well that airborne pollution connects with particles. So the airborne particles of pollution connect with viruses and bacteria within the air and make them more likely to penetrate, which is why air pollution is such a problem for our health. Well, one of the reasons why. And so not only that, but also the nitric oxide that your paranasal sinuses produce as you breathe in through your nostrils. You're producing these vasodilators, these powerful vasodilators, which actually help to improve the function of your blood vessels. And so it's an amazing thing that actually, you wouldn't believe it, that breathing through your nose is actually really great for not only for your immune health, but also for your cardiac health as well.
Oh.
So that's just a little tip that not a lot of people know. In terms of foods, I've mentioned about all of the amazing foods that we can enjoy more of. Zinc is contained in a lot of those foods, which is important for reducing viral replication inside our cells. Vitamin D is another really important one. There are 16 clinical trials all pooled together. I think there's nearly about 7,000 people. And what was amazing is that they found that people who were taking vitamin D supplements had on average about a third less likely to develop a respiratory infection, whether it was a cold or an influenza type illness or pneumonia. And when vitamin D levels were low, then the improvements went up by nearly half compared to placebo. So you were, almost half as likely to develop a respiratory infection if you had the vitamin D. Now, I would say that with a caveat that because it's a fat soluble vitamin, it's important not to take too much. So you either find out your levels from your doctor and titrate your supplements according to that, or you start off with maybe 1,000 or 2,000 units a day, but don't go higher than about 4,000 units, because that would be too much if your levels are normal. So yeah, that's what you can do. I mentioned the benefits of herbs and spices. Sleep is so important, and I'm sure many of your listeners will be really familiar with some of the benefits of prioritizing sleep. But the natural killer cells that our immune system produces really thrive when we get a decent night's sleep, and your bone marrow is working much better when when you're able to sleep well. And even one poor night of shut eye can actually be really damaging. It can reduce your immune function by up to 40% the next day.
Gosh.
Which I was absolutely blown away when I read about that. So think about, I mean, to be honest, there's two camps of people. You've got the camp of people that don't think about sleep, don't prioritize sleep, and end up not getting enough. Or you've got the camp of people that struggle to sleep and do everything they possibly can under the sun to get better sleep and still feel like they're not getting enough. So sometimes the advice is different depending on which of those two camps you fall in. But just try to remember that sleep is a natural physiological process. And so it's quite hard to control your sleep, but there are things that you can do to improve it, and I can go into a bit more detail about that if you think that would be useful for people. But suffice to say, if you're in the group of people that don't prioritize sleep, don't think about sleep, but find yourself kind of staying up to watch that one last episode of your favorite show on Netflix, or sort of staying up thinking about things that you need to do the next day without actually just thinking, what, I'm going to go to bed, I'm going to turn my device off, I'm going to make it charge in a different room, I'm just going to a cool sleeping space. It's amazing how much better it can be for the way your body is functioning. And then we can go into different advice for somebody who's thinking about sleep all the time, but if you're not someone that prioritizes it, then that's something that you can think about, which will really make a huge difference.
I mean, I know that sleep for our members is really, really important, and it's we do patient support programs, and it's by far one of our most popular ones. It definitely is a problem, I think, for lots of people, and the older you get, the worse it is.
Of course, because there are so many reasons why you don't sleep, physiological reasons, hot flushes, irritable bladder, prostate problems. These are things that, as we get older, they become more of an issue. Not to mention, for many people, anxiety and those sort of negative thoughts that can come in. And for younger people who are, who've got younger children and babies, and in the past where people would be supported perhaps in getting a better night's sleep, parents these days, it's exhausting because you've got to be functioning, you've got to work, and you've got a baby that doesn't sleep. So there's loads of reasons, external reasons, why sleep could be an issue. But I mean, I do have a really interesting podcast episode that I presented actually for Holland and Barrett called The Wellness Edit, and there are two amazing sleep experts that I interviewed for that particular episode. It's only 40 minutes long,
Mhm.
but it's a really nice insight into the best practical tips for helping you to sleep well.
Oh,
Nina Ramlakash and Guy Meadows were the two sleep experts that I interviewed. They're brilliant. So if
yeah.
you want to check that out, it's the Wellness Edit podcast.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll put the links onto this video afterwards so people will be able to find it.
Oh, that would be really helpful. I think
Yeah.
people probably really resonate with these podcasts. So if you don't listen to any other one, I would listen to that one on sleep. And there was also one on how to be happy, which was just
Oh,
lovely. So
oh,
which was a really nice one. But anyway, so yes, sleep is a big one, and movement too. And I know it probably all sounds quite logical, but many people don't necessarily realize that the way the blood system works, we have a heart and it pumps our blood around our body. And that's how we get oxygen to all the different organs of our body. Most of our immune cells travel through the lymphatic system, and that doesn't have a heart to pump it around. That uses our muscles to pump it around, which is why moving our bodies regularly is so important, because it's our muscle movements that help the lymph fluid to go where it needs to go throughout the body.
I don't think I'd ever heard. I don't know if that's me being really ignorant, but I don't think I'd ever heard that.
Well, it's a simple thing that people they don't realize, but actually, when the penny, they think, oh, there's a really good reason why I can move my body throughout the day and it makes me feel better.
Mm,
And why it's important, if I am trying to optimize my immune health, that I do move my body, because it's that skeletal muscle movement that allows the lymph fluid to flow properly. And if we're stagnant, then it's more difficult for those immune cells to travel around and do their job.
yes. Oh, now it sort of makes sense. Whereas I always thought it was more about doing exercise, linked to weight and all of that, and then realizing what you're saying is really making your body function properly.
Yes, exactly. And I would love for people not to think about weight loss when they're exercising. I want them to think about their immune health,
Mm,
reducing their risk of cancer, to go out for a run. I really did, and many people still do, and I get why, because sometimes it's not the most fun activity. But when I found out that I said this to one of my patients who's going through chemotherapy. Their oncologist was telling them, and I researched this and I realized that it was largely accurate. Their oncologist was telling them, you've got 6 months of chemotherapy and that's going to reduce your risk of this cancer recurring significantly. She was like, great, I'll do it. And then he said, also, moving your body, if you exercise at least sort of half an hour or so, 3 times, that will also reduce your risk of this cancer returning just as much. And so she was like, what? I exercise and it's as effective as my chemotherapy? Why would I put myself through 6 months of grueling chemotherapy for
mm,
this bowel cancer if I can? I mean, obviously, she did both. But the point is, she began to see exercise in a completely different light.
mm.
And, when with my patients, I say the same thing. If you realize that exercise and moving your body is not just about, punishing, it's not about punishing yourself, it's about giving your body that glory, making sure, I am moving my body today because my body is helping me prevent the risk of cancer. My body is helping my immune system function. This is why I'm going to move my body today.
Yeah, no, it's always much better to have an incentive or to understand why you're doing something for positive reasons, because it means then you've got a good chance of keeping it up. And obviously the things that we're talking about aren't just, well, I do it once and then it's all fine. We're talking about a lifestyle, and
Yes,
and moving forward to try and put all of these things into a lifestyle that we don't even think about them. It's just part of who we are and what we do.
that would be amazing. That's one of the core things I would say actually as part of this talk. It's about finding a lifestyle that suits your core values, what you want to achieve and who you want to be. And it makes it far more likely then that you can hopefully stick with some of these changes, because it's always hard to make new changes. It's easy for us to fall into old patterns because it's familiar and it's what we're used to. But if we could just there's two things I think help people to make new lifestyle choices. The first is to think about your values each morning as you wake up and how your lifestyle fits into those values, the things that are important to you. And they can change day by day depending on what you want to focus on. This morning I did that same exercise, and I thought, well, my three values today, are love and gratitude and focus. I'm gonna approach this day ready to give love to the people that I'm talking to, thankful for the opportunity to talk, and focused on creating hopefully what's going to be a good session. But your values may be, the health of your body, the ability to go outside in nature, acts of service for the day. And when you begin to realize that when your body is functioning well, you can start to live the values that you actually really appreciate, and the things that you want to give out in the world, which is wonderful. So that's one of the steps. But another one would be just to start with something that you can achieve, and you can feel good about, rather than trying to do an entire 24 sort of 360 turnaround, which might be quite difficult for you to maintain. And then you go through this cycle of guilt or feeling shame that, I didn't do it and I'm hopeless, I'm useless. You've got to get those sort of thoughts out of your head and remember to think positively and go for small changes.
It's about looking for the quick wins and the low-hanging fruit, things that you can adopt relatively easy into your lifestyle and building from there, really, isn't it? And just thinking about the supermarkets and, and having looked at your book, and there's some lovely recipes, and, you're talking about all the different legumes and the beans and all the different things. When we go into supermarkets, quite often we just don't see those things. What's in front of us are all the crisps and the chocolate, and it's trying to take time to go down different aisles, isn't it? And have a look at other things that are there.
Yes, and just as the food industry spends a lot of money in trying to make us enjoy these hyper-palatable foods, so do supermarkets. There's a reason why certain foods are at eye level, and there's a reason why certain foods are not. There's a reason why you have to keep going back to the aisles that are the most appealing are the ones that are nearer the front, and then you have to kind of go search through to find the ones that you really the things that you actually want to buy, and then you have to go back through all these other products that are not so healthy, and that it's all engineered, I think, in a way that makes
I think there's huge planning going into all of this, and of course then it's the other stuff about how much supermarkets pay to be the manufacturers of the food, how much they pay, I suppose, to have the position on the shelves and all of those things, as opposed to really thinking about our own welfare.
It's true. So that's why it's good for us to do the thinking, and unfortunately it shouldn't have to be that hard, should it? We should it should be easy.
I think it's a bit of a battle, but I'm going to ask people to start. We've got some questions already, and I will ask people to start posting some questions if you have anything you'd like to ask Gemma. And I was looking through, so we've spoken about supplements, and it's really funny, vitamin D comes up every week. We speak about vitamin D, but we don't speak a lot about omega-3s.
Yes, well, omega-3s, I think I've mentioned those in my supplement section. They are really healthy for our immune health, our heart health, our brain health. And where do they come from? They come from, it's quite hard for us to get enough omega-3s in a Western diet. So you've got plant-based omega-3s from flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. So you're thinking about nuts and seeds, essentially. And you've got marine algae and fish that give you the long chain omega-3s. So a lot of the time, this is why when you look at data around things like brain health and heart health, omega-3s often come up because they are really valuable in those areas. But are people getting enough? No, not generally. For people who just generally have a kind of a fairly standard Western diet, what tends to happen is the omega-6s from processed foods and oils mostly tend to outnumber those healthy omega-3s, and they both compete for the same receptors in our body. So if you're having loads more of the omega-6s, which most of us do, then it's actually quite hard to absorb those omega-3s even if you are having them. So really focus on, okay, well, maybe I will I'll include flax seeds every single day in my breakfast porridge, or I'll sprinkle them on top of my stew, or I'll mix them in with my yogurt, or however you can get them in, because they are really important. And I would suggest having them crushed up, milled flax seeds. They're also called linseeds,
Mm.
so that they're more available to you. You can absorb them through the gut wall. If you're somebody that eats fish, then oily fish is best and small fish is best, because what you want to try and avoid is the larger fish that have bioaccumulated more heavy metals, toxins, microplastics from the ocean. And so
That's
yeah,
sad.
yeah, and that's the other issue. Pregnant women are advised not to have more than a couple of portions a week because of the risk to the baby of the heavy metals exposures. And they're told to completely avoid like shark, marlin, tuna steaks, often maybe limit tuna steaks for the same reason. And
Mm.
this is desperately sad, because many populations of humans over the course of our existence on this planet have lived near coastlines and have benefited from the omega-3s provided by seafood. Um, Many haven't, and that's another interesting aside. So you've got lots of populations that have been, lifelong vegetarians who lived nowhere near a coastline and have developed adequate amounts of omega-3s, and that's thought to be, because they've been able to enjoy some of these other plant foods as well. So I suppose the bottom line is, if you're worried about ocean pollution and sustainability, then algae oil is a great idea. You can get it, I mean, many people will have heard of cod liver oil supplements,
Mm.
but you can actually get algae oil supplements, which one study has shown that I read, that they are just as bioavailable, if not more bioavailable, than the cod liver oil omegas. And it's a pure and direct source. In fact, it's where the fish get them from. So the fish take in algae, and that's how their muscles contain it.
Right, so this is going to the source, really, isn't it?
That's it. That's exactly my point. You'd be going direct to source,
Yeah.
getting yourself a pure form of omega-3s, and they're often now made in specialized, they're made in the laboratories using algae. So anything sort of in terms of the ocean sustainability side of it, there's no fish that are used or misused in the creation of these sorts of supplements, if that's something that's interesting to you. But yeah, it's important for our health, and I think that we should definitely prioritize our omega-3s.
Mm. And so, on a whole food, or I can never say it, whole food plant-based diet, you don't include any fish at all, do you?
No, I don't. And I'd say most studies on epidemiological data do suggest that having a couple of portions of fish a week is generally beneficial.
Mm.
There was one recent study to show that that was the case, especially if you already had pre-existing heart disease, for example. Having said that, we also know that fully plant-based approaches are tremendously helpful for preventing and reversing some of the symptomatology of heart disease. So what's interesting is that fish on the whole have certainly been a health food historically, but you know, looking at the bigger picture, as I mentioned, we've got fish farms that contain most of the fish that we eat from the supermarket will be farmed fish, and they contain inordinate amounts of ocean pollution, unfortunately. And I don't think that that is overall a choice that I want to make personally, but everybody has different priorities, and so I wouldn't want to say to someone that they shouldn't have fish, but I think I tend to look at the bigger picture. And so when I look at the environmental sustainability side, I listened to a talk by a Canadian physician who's an environmentalist, and he told me that 30,000 fish a second are killed for us to eat, or most of them are actually sort of just bycatch.
Mm.
And I was completely blown away by those figures. It's hard for me to even comprehend how much marine life is being killed for human use. And so I thought, you know what, personally, I'm happy to avoid it. I know now that there's many studies to say that you can be healthy without it, and
Mm.
certainly, you'll see those studies from the book. So that's my choice. But I would say that with whole food plant-based approaches, generally, all animal products are excluded, but a plant predominant diet, people don't have to go all the way. You know, there's not the evidence to suggest that you have to do it 100% for, you know, for benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I was just going to ask you what I obviously thought was a good question, and I can't remember what it was. Oh, that was it. Do you feel that you need to take, if you are taking a whole food-based plant diet, do you feel that you need to take supplements, or if you're doing it properly, you don't need to have supplements?
So all of our diets are supplemented in one way or another, and this is something that I spoke to a nutritionist about recently. You know, they were saying that all our bread is fortified with various B vitamins, thiamine, B6. You know, our milk is fortified with iodine. Our breakfast cereals are fortified. Our plant milks are fortified. Our salt often is fortified. So, you know, first point is that we have a lot of fortification and supplementation without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Second point to make is that yes, vitamin B12 is an absolute essential supplement to take if you're fully plant-based.
Right.
The reason for that is because vitamin B12, although you only need a tiny amount, it is crucial for the way that your cells function, and it's actually made by microbes. So vitamin B12 is made by microbes in the soil and water, and you know, understandably, I'm not somebody who would ever advocate eating, you know, foods that had soil on or untreated water, but that's of course what grass-eating herbivores do to get their vitamin B12.
Mm.
And then that's how it ends up in their muscles. Now, interestingly, with factory farming, the way it is, these animals are not grass-fed, and so they will have supplements in their feed. So they'll have a big amount of feed that they're given in these factory farms, and the feed contains supplementation with B12, which is then why it ends up in the meat that we eat, you know, the muscles of the animal.
Mm.
So in a sense, I suppose you could think of it a little bit in the same vein as the algae oil supplement, perhaps. You know, you're maybe cutting out the middle cow, if you like, or the middle chicken.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
And it's amazing, actually, isn't it, how things have changed over the years into what, you know, what was in a lettuce and to what is in a lettuce, you know, a few years ago as to what's in a lettuce. I mean, I think they always use lettuce as good examples of things that have been injected with not great things. But it is, but it's so sad, as you're saying about fish, because fish we feel is natural because it comes from the sea, and obviously not now so natural because it's full of man-made rubbish, for want of a better word.
It is sad. I find it very sad, which is why I'm so passionate about planetary health, and why, you know, one of the many reasons why I also advocate for a plant-based approach is because it's a way of helping giving the oceans a bit of a breather. Um, and but it's also about what we bioaccumulate. You know, phthalates, plastics. The biggest dietary source of phthalates is chicken, I think, in the UK, and I think it's fish in the US. Um, these plastics are in our food chain, and as the apex predator, we are the ones that bioaccumulate the most. And so, you know, that's something that I think has a huge impact on our hormonal regulation and our hormonal health. And little things like, you know, we often buy. I've got a plastic bottle right here, in fact, with a little bit of leftover water in. I I'm really mindful not to use that plastic bottle if it's a hot day, because I know that the plastics from the bottle will leach into my water and I'll drink those microplastics. I generally like to use glass bottles for that reason, or you know, the environmentally friendly. I've got lots of them downstairs. You know, the metal ones. When you're microwaving, yeah, when you're microwaving food, you don't want to microwave it in a plastic container because the plastics will leach into the food. These little things that people don't necessarily know, but that will actually really help to reduce the amount of environmental exposures to hormonal shifting products.
And I assume then that all of those things are detrimental to our immune system.
Well, indirectly, yes, because our hormones talk to our immune system. And if we are taking in substances that can be mimickers of estrogen, for example, then that has a bigger impact on our digestion and the way that our immune cells interact. And our immune cells are right next to our gut, so they will be in direct contact with what we're consuming. And if we're consuming microplastics, then that does affect our immune cells, yes. It's sad, isn't it? But hopefully, I mean, that's why I think it's so important to have a chat like this, is because we can begin to sort of see these larger links and how they can fit in with our own overall health, and we can make decisions that hopefully will empower us. You know, break a sweat, move our bodies, eat low in the food chain. You know, enjoy all these foods that will hopefully, you know, improve our immune function. Get a better night's sleep. All those things that unless we knew about it, we may not really consider.
And they all interconnect. I think that's really important to understand. One has an impact on the other. You're not just having a bad night because of one thing. It's a lot of things.
Yes, and that's the other thing I think we haven't touched on as much as I was thinking, but stress and how stress can impact our immune system, and how long-term cortisol can reduce our immune function, and things like managing that stress as much as we can. And managing that anxiety, and again, that'll probably be a whole talk, won't it, that we could perhaps do, but that's something to focus on. Maybe things like journaling or meditation, or even watching your favorite comedy show, things that make you feel good. Surround yourself with people that make you feel good, and it's just as much about the things that you watch, the things that you listen to, as it is about the things that you're eating as well, I do think, because it shapes the way we feel about ourselves. It shapes the way that we decide what we're going to do with our days.
And I think the more the themes of our webinars are all different, but they all come back basically to the same type of messages, what we take. And it's not just about what you eat, it's about all the mental health, etc., and the sleep. And I think the more that we keep drip feeding this into our day-to-day life, it starts to resonate for us to go, well, actually, there's so much being said. I ought to explore this further and start. For lots of people, it's just taking those first steps, isn't it?
It is. And I often feel like this in my general practice. You plant a seed, and whether the seed lands, whether the seed is able to thrive in fertile soil, get enough water, get enough sunshine, to turn into a luscious plant, it depends. You may not have the right moment in your life. It may not be the right time for that seed to grow into something more, but for some people, they're ready. They have the right conditions and the right motivation, and you watch the seed and it grows into something beautiful.
And it's not, and it's something not to be frightened of, to change these things. They're not going to hurt you. All they can do is, keep the status quo, or you can get better, start feeling better and healthier.
Exactly, it's a win-win, and as long as you approach it with that mindset, rather than berating yourself if you feel like you had all these plans and you didn't manage to do it. No, really just focus on the things that you did achieve, and the way that you can be your best friend. Say things to yourself that your friend would say to you, rather than that inner critic, which is potentially liable to be your worst enemy at some point.
Which is a huge old nag, isn't it? Right, I'm just going to quickly look at some of the questions. What are your top 5 go-to fruit and veg?
Oh, well, they vary depending on what day. I get a veg and fruit box from a company that delivers it to my door each week. So I basically often eat what they send, which is quite nice, because then you're almost forced then to make a different decision about what you can have. I think root vegetables are fantastic. They're very satiating. They're full of fiber, micronutrients, antioxidants, but they also fill you up really nicely, and you can make them a base for all sorts of meals. Cruciferous vegetables are brilliant. They've got sulforaphane, which is a fantastic anti-cancer compound. A little tip I can give you is, if you chop them up about 20-30 minutes before you actually want to cook them, then you allow time for the enzymic reaction between myrosinase and the sulforaphanes to allow those anti-cancer compounds to then go inside your body and be used. Wow. Or if you just eat them raw, that probably would also do the same, because it takes you a little while to digest, and that enzymic reaction can happen inside the body. So, if you're having, tender stem broccoli sticks with hummus raw, then you're going to do that anyway. But if you chop up your cauliflower about half an hour before you're going to cook it, then that's beneficial. Think about other ones like kale and sprouts. These are all really helpful, as I say, for a number of the bodily processes, and not emphasized enough, I think. I love berries. I think they're fantastic. The brighter the colours, the better. And what have I said? I've said root vegetables, I've said cruciferous, I've said berries. I think of two more groups. I really like adding onions and garlic into cooking for the reason I mentioned earlier. I think it's a very easy and delicious base for a lot of meals, and it provides a certain amount of quercetin, which is important for our immune function. And
I think that had, I said to you I made the macaroni cheese. I think that had garlic and onions in it.
I do love a bit of garlic and onion. What else can I say? You know what? Bananas are very versatile. You can freeze them. They taste great in smoothies, and they're also great for making nice cream. If you've got a decent blender, you can add them and make, with a bit of cocoa powder, make yourself some chocolate ice cream.
Right. So next question. Unfortunately, I'm intolerant to legumes, garlics, onions, chilies, and wheat, amongst other foods. I have IBS and diverticular disease, so I have to be really careful what I eat. I also have rheumatoid arthritis and migraines, so suffer a lot with inflammation. I'm taking a lot of the supplements you mentioned, make sure I sleep at least 8 hours a day and take a lot of long walks every week, but wondered what else I can do to help my inflammatory system.
It sounds like you're really struggling, and that's very difficult. That's very challenging when you have intolerances to these foods. What I would say is that sometimes these intolerances are driven by inflammation, and so it's still possible potentially to enjoy these foods over time, but it's about getting the right help in the meantime in some cases. So you can seek out, if you have the budget to, you can seek out a nutritionist who can help you with that process so that you can start to be able to enjoy some of those foods again. If you wanted to educate yourself a little bit more, or you don't necessarily have the resources for that, I would actually recommend a really good book. Now, have I got a copy here? Where is it? I might do. It's around somewhere. But anyway, I'll tell you what it's called. It's called Fiber Fueled. It's by an American gastroenterologist called Dr. Will Bulsevich, and he talks about the importance of helping with gut healing and how that can in itself often sort out some of the food intolerances that we suffer from, which, as I say, are often driven by inflammation. And I can't give personalized medical advice, obviously, because I'm not your physician, and so as a general educational piece, then that's a great book to start with. And there are also online courses where you can at least get some advice from, if not directly pertaining to your medical conditions. One example of such is the Happy Gut course, which is run by two chefs, but they devised it with a gastroenterologist who specializes in inflammatory bowel disorders and a dietitian. And so it's a 6-week course where they'll show you all these different meal plans and ways of cooking. And what they're essentially doing, the principle of it, as far as I can see from having looked at the course structure, is you are reducing or minimizing your FODMAP foods, your fermentable oligosaccharides and things that cause the bloating and the intolerance perhaps to start with. And then you're gradually, very, very gradually reintroducing them, as well as other beneficial prebiotics. So things that will help your gut bugs to thrive. Not probiotics necessarily. There's not that much in terms of data on the benefits of probiotics long term, but prebiotics. Prebiotics are essentially gut microbe food, and fiber is one of the most important prebiotics you could ever consume, but also things like glucomannan and acacia powder. These are prebiotics that you can start to include in your diet, which will then help to build up those gut defenses and allow you to then begin to tolerate some of the foods that you have been struggling with previously, slowly.
That's great. And thank goodness we're recording this so that we can go back and re-understand all the words that you've just said and all the things you mentioned, because I don't think I could have written it down if I tried quickly enough.
Yeah.
So we're just sort of really running out of time, but just very quickly, one other question. Are frozen fruit and veg as good as fresh, particularly thinking of berries, as they're so much cheaper at this time of the year?
Yes, get yourself some frozen foods. These nutrients are so important. It doesn't matter if they're frozen. And in fact, sometimes they may even be fresher because they were probably fresh when they were frozen.
And very quickly, this is definitely obviously not a plug, and somebody has asked, and I will ask, does Dr. Newman do private consultations?
Well, I do. I haven't been doing them during the pandemic because I've been so busy learning new protocols, looking after my NHS patients and writing the book.
No,
But if you can email me, then I might announce on my newsletter when I'm seeing more private patients. There's also a really interesting service which I don't get paid for to promote in any way, shape or form. It's called Plant-Based Health Online, and it's just been set up by a colleague of mine, Dr. Laura Freeman. And I think that they do offer really reasonably priced plant-based nutrition advice with they've got people like dietitians and other physicians on that resource on the website, and it's called Plant-Based Health Online. So I think that that's also really helpful for people if you're interested in something that's a bit more bespoke and where they will be looking at your medical record to help you personally with the decisions that you're making and what you want to achieve.
Brilliant. Right. Well, on that note, I think that we'll wrap up today. So if you're interested in, I can highly recommend Gemma's book. It's just a really interesting read. And as I said, we've got some to give away. So please go on to Talk Health and put your name in the hat. And just to say thank you so much, Gemma, for your time. It's just so interesting. And now I know why I've got to move around.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of it. Once you know why, you're so much more likely to enjoy it too.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.